Homefront 2, Homefronter. Burns, you've played it. Tell me about it.
As it's properly known, Homefront the Revolution is surprisingly not shit. A strong statement to open on. But let's face it, this game has faced a lot of troubles, a lot of setbacks.
No, the original wasn't exactly acclaimed.
No, I actually didn't think the original, in terms of its multiplayer, was that bad. But yeah, this has been through a few publishers, and it's had a rough time, and then
development hell, if you will.
Yes, and it's changed its genre and everything, and those are usually not good signs. However, so I went into the game with the bar set pretty low, and yeah, it's this year's second Far Cry game. Be under no illusion, it is a Far Cry game. It's astonishing how similar they are. Like, the main character is called Ethan Brady. Okay, Far Cry 3's protagonist is called Jason Brody.
Right.
You use a camera to tag enemies.
Right.
The enemy threat indicator UI is the same.
Right.
When you are injured, you inject stuff into your arm. And the alert phases are very similar. And again, it's one of those games where you spend a lot of time being an icon janitor. So you open your map. And in fact, there's a moment where
I've never heard that term before.
It has this compulsive nature to it, where you want to clean up the map, basically. But it also does a lot of things quite well, and I wasn't expecting there to be that level of quality. Now, I should say I did play it on a very high level PC, so I can't talk for the console builds. Just imagine a Far Cry game based in the future where Korea have taken over the US. Imagine this October or whatever. I know it's coming out sooner than that, but imagine this October you were starting to get into the marketing blitz of Far Cry the Revolution.
Right,
so you've had Primal in the past, and now we're going to have the Revolution. No one would bat an eyelid, really. What the developers have done extremely well, in fact, is their aspiration was to make you feel like you were a guerrilla fighter. Yeah. So they told me when I interviewed them that they're not all of them, just one of them. They didn't all stand in a line while I spoke to them, but one of their inspirations was Syria. So, where it's urban combat.
Shit, time out. Come on.
Yeah, well, I know, but a lot of bombed out buildings, and what would happen is the guerrilla fighters would strike at the force, asymmetrical warfare. The overwhelming force would be hit by a much smaller deployment of troops, and then those troops would just bleed back into all of these tunnels and all of these bombed out buildings that formed essentially a warren in these cities. And they've done that really, really well. Dan Buster Studios. When you're playing it, you are very weak, and the KPA is so much more technologically advanced than you. Yeah. You spend a lot of time scavenging supplies to make bombs, etc. And you do spend a lot of time.
You make wallets as well.
You don't find any dogs and skin them, no. Yeah. But you do spend a lot of time rolling, say, pipe bombs underneath, enemy patrols.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah,
okay. That sounds proper like Terminator.
Well, this is it. I came back into the office babbling some, madness basically about how Dan Buster Studios had made one half of the greatest Terminator game never made. It's got this really oppressive. Philadelphia is not, when it's bombed to shit, when there's rubble everywhere, and when it's night and pissing it down with rain, and the only splashes of colour are from the strongholds, which have giant neon signs which say "Stay back, civilians, stay in your homes." That City 17 sort of thing. Very dystopic. You're like, man, this does feel like a Terminator game. And when you have to run out, and they have these drones and all of that, and you're thinking, man, someone's going to mod the T800s into this. It's going to be the best game of the year. But it does have that appeal. Like you run out, your weapons are very modular, so you're not very well armed. It's got the old Crisis style. You can bring up the gun at any point and attach a scope, but you can also change the entire firing mechanism. So probably the best example is you can have a crossbow, but that can also have a flamethrower attachment, and it all feels very kind of improvised. And so that impacts the way you play it. So you run out, you kill maybe a general who's coming through to inspect a barracks, and then you have to run away because the overwhelming response is drones, troops on the boots on the ground.
That's quite cool though. That sort of crafting, the modularity of it would feel improvised.
Yeah, rather than say a Far Cry the usual ones. It's like, now I've got a bigger gun. There's a lot of despair and desperation. All of the, again, like a Terminator game or film, all of the humans, the resistance, are underground in old subway stations that weren't on the maps when the Koreans invaded, so they don't know that they're down there.
This is just getting me excited now. I'm really excited now, Steve.
Now, it's not amazing. The backstory is still incredibly shite. They've changed it.
Yeah.
So now it's essentially Steve Jobs was North Korean, and Silicon Valley didn't happen. It was Silicon River, and North Korea invent iPads first or something. Like, you just don't worry about it. Like the dollar collapses because people keep on buying North Korean iPads.
The dollar collapses because Korea has gooder iPads.
Yeah, like no one's heard of the foreign currency reserve. You know, that sort of thing. But you just kind of brush it off.
American iPads are like Android tablets. They're just shite.
Exactly.
Nobody wants one.
So they have this system. They have 3 zones. They have green, yellow, red zones.
Yeah.
Red zones are complete shoot on sight. Green zones are where the KPA are headquartered, and yellow are kind of, you can walk about in plain sight. You can't be seen that often. You can't have a gun drawn.
So it's got the same traffic light system as the food nutrition then.
It's like yellow, you can get away with it, but red, you know you're in trouble later on.
Because red's just like, dead. Cardiac arrest, that's it.
You know, that changes up the gameplay. You do feel after a couple of hours of bombing and shooting that when you get into the yellow zone, where you can actually be seen on the street and you have to play it a bit more stealthily, that's fine. But it also has an interesting mechanic called Hearts and Minds, where in an area, if you perform subversive activities, you could get in. It's like a Ubisoft game, like if you pull down, if you stop loudspeakers from blaring out propaganda, or you take over an outpost, or you stop civilians from being harassed, then that meter goes up. So it's similar to like Just Cause, the heat meter, I think, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So once that goes up, the revolution begins, and you clear out the districts, so you can recruit resistance fighters to accompany you on certain missions, and there's a visual change in the district. So the KPA will be forced out. There'll be fires everywhere, it's just tiny little things like that. Where again, the game isn't. The shooting is merely not just a little bit above average, but it's fine. And all of its best stuff is kind of cribbed from other games. So Far Cry has the Crisis-style modular weapons.
Sounds like there's a kind of an Infamous vibe to it as well in terms of the progression.
But it has enough of these tiny little elements where, the level design is actually quite good for what the game is trying to do. Because like I said, you can't run in and just shoot and loot. You have to bleed back out of the environment, and then the level design in terms of its interconnectivity is really quite good. And I came out of it thinking, you know what, I would play that. I'd play more of that because I'd like to see what they do with it and what happens in the green zones. And
I tell you what, I mean, I think I've had a similar experience to you, but without just from your description of it. This is well on my radar now. I really want to play it.
Listen, I had to be honest with the chap I was talking to. I tell you, I basically said I thought it was going to be shite. And I thought I'd be honest about it because I've been on social media saying Homefront is going to be shite, basically. And then I walked in there and I was like, actually, fair enough. You've cribbed. And I mean, let's be very polite about it. An homage. But at the same time, Far Cry has an appeal. And this is Far Cry the Revolution. And you know what? I like what Dan Buster has done with it. It seems they made a few smart decisions. At times it even feels a little bit like Stalker.
Okay.
Because
not too much at all. That game got a bit shit.
But there's a bit where you go out and a bit like Metro in places as well. The kind of the
despair.
Like a
pig with a man's face.
Well, no, you've got a gas mask on and you're out on the street and all of this. And so far, there's none of the real shite that afflicted the original game. There's no press X to jump in mass graves or any of that. And it sounds like I'm being very negative about it, but I don't want people to get too excited. But if you about it, because I don't want to be like, oh, it's incredible, and then you're playing like, well, it's just kind of like a Far Cry set in the future. But I tell you what, there are enough changes to that formula to get me more excited than Far Cry Primal did, for example. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they can sustain that over. I'm looking forward to seeing if constant fort hitting and weapon cache scavenging gets boring. But at the same time, I played it for about 4 hours. I came out and I was speaking to a few people like, you know what, nowhere near as bad as I thought. Eat my words on that one. And I'm interested to see where it goes now.